Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Estonian Army Museum in Tallinn, Estonia, taking a look at two very scarce examples of Estonian production designated marksman's rifles from the 1930s. Now, there's a little bit to unpack here. So there are two main patterns of these rifles, and we have examples of each of them. We have .303 caliber heavy-barreled Arisakas, and we have 7.62 by 54 rimmed caliber heavy-barreled Enfield P14s. Now, how did they end up with these two patterns of rifles? Well, the Estonian Army is using two different calibers. Let me back up one step here. First, the organizations that we're going to be dealing with here are both the Estonian Army, the Estonian Defense Forces, and the Estonian Defense League. Despite the very similar names, they're two independent, separate organizations. The Army is the Army. The Defense League is it's a civilian, really sort of a civilian militia organization, very similar to the Finnish Civil Guards, like 1/3 social club, 1/3 competition shooting club, 1/3 military auxiliary. That's kind of the Defense League in general. And also at this time, to give you a little background context, target shooting is an extremely popular sport in Estonia. The Estonian teams in the 1930s international rifle competitions are extremely successful. Like, it's rare for them not to be in the top 3 places in major international matches. They won a bunch of really impressive big international matches. And that sport shooting community has a massive influence on the Army and the Defense League. I mean, the sport shooters in the Defense League are really one in the same much of the time. The Army has a lot of competition shooters in it as well. But the Army's choice of weapons for precision shooters, for designated marksmen or snipers, however you want to term it, there isn't a really, it's kind of both at the same time at this point for the Estonian military. Anyway, their choice in rifle is very directly influenced by the sport shooting community. And what the sport shooting community wanted was essentially a military action in a military caliber. That was the required standard. Today, this sort of target shooting, Olympic-style target shooting as well, for example, is often done in .22 rimfire. Back in the 1930s, it was real military calibers. So they would take a military action in a military cartridge with a very heavy target barrel on it. And that's what we see represented here. Now, the Army in Estonia has 3 divisions. The 1st division is in the north, the 2nd division is in the south, and the 3rd division is basically in the west, in Tallinn. And the Army in general is equipped with a bit of a mishmash of small arms. They have primarily .303 caliber stuff, a lot of Enfield P14s, but it's not enough to fully equip everybody. And so there are also guys who are using Mosin Nagants chambered for 7.62 by 54 rimmed. And so the split typically is the northern guys, the 1st division, get 7.62 caliber guns. The guys in the south and the west, the 2nd and 3rd divisions, get .303 caliber guns. And so there are 2 patterns of designated marksman's rifle that are adopted, or that are purchased. One in .303 and one in 7.62 by 54 rimmed. And that's what we have here. This is one of the 54 rimmed guns. It is an both of these are weird combinations. This is a P14 Enfield in 7.62 by 54 rimmed, and this is a Type 38 Arisaka in .303 British. And those are the 2 standard patterns of Estonian sniper rifles. Bear with me here. So, Arsenal is the main government small arms manufacturing facility. It's located in Tallinn. It's the only arms factory in Estonia. It does all sorts of military production, submachine guns, armored cars. They refurbish rifles for military use, and they manufacture target rifles for the civilian market, as well as the same basic target rifles for the military, for sniper use. You could walk into Arsenal and order yourself a rifle basically built to order, like what size stock would you like, what length of pull, what style exactly of sights, that sort of thing. And you basically would be getting the same thing that the Army was purchasing. So let's take a closer look at this. Let me show you specifically what they did to these rifles. So this rifle has really seen better days, alas. This was recovered from a house that was being renovated. It had been hiding in the attic or in the rafters for for many decades by the time it was found. So excuse its poor condition, it's been through quite a lot. But what we have here is a Type 38 Arisaka. The sights have been removed. The barrel has been replaced by a very, very heavy barrel. There are actually two different patterns of these that the Army worked with. Their initial batches were using 27 millimeter in diameter barrels, so that's just over a 1 inch in diameter barrel, and they're cylindrical barrels. So aside from the step down here from the chamber, the barrel is the same diameter all the way out to the muzzle. They found 27 millimeter to be a bit heavier than they actually wanted, and so they scaled it down a little bit, and the follow-up batches used 24 millimeter barrels. This is one of the 24 millimeter ones. Of course, the upper handguard is gone. The front end of the stock has been cut down just after the barrel band. Not free-floated though, although it's possible that this wood has swelled over the interim 80 plus years. The markings are still visible here on the receiver. So we have 3/8 shiki, that's Type 38 in Japanese. And then we have the imperial chrysanthemum on the top of the receiver. Now in the center of that chrysanthemum is the stamp of the Tokyo Army Arsenal. It's 4 interlocking circles. It's actually intended to represent 4 cannonballs stacked together. And these are rifles that were originally in military service, and they were taken out of service and sold as foreign export. And by stamping the Army or the Arsenal mark over the imperial chrysanthemum, it officially canceled the imperial ownership of the rifle. So we see this we see chrysanthemums being ground off or otherwise defaced after World War II. This is basically the same thing, but being done on a formal, official, standardized sort of basis. So this is how the Japanese Army and Japanese industry sold guns to export. They would cancel a chrysanthemum like that. You can just make out that same 4 cannonball marking there. That's the manufacturer's stamp of the Tokyo Army Arsenal. The serial number was right here. It's pretty much illegible at this point. And then we actually have a nicely preserved marking, Arsenal Tallinn 1934 on the barrel. So the receiver was Japanese, the barrels are Estonian. The stock here is the original Japanese one. You can tell from what looks like a crack here. This is actually a 2-piece stock. It is dovetailed together. That's how the Japanese made Arisaka stocks in order to make more efficient use of wood. The pistol grip has been spliced on at Tallinn, or at Arsenal. And then the sights have been replaced by a nice adjustable diopter sight, also made by Arsenal in Tallinn. Now, Estonia got a bunch of Arisaka rifles. These came from Russian forces that were kicked out in 1920 when Estonia got its independence. They were also, a bunch of them got traded to Estonia from Finland when the Finnish Civil Guard decided to transition from Arisakas to Mosin Nagants as its standard pattern rifle. And the Estonians converted about 23,000 of these in the 1920s to .303 caliber, which was a cartridge that they had much better supply of than 6.5 Japanese. So the sniper rifles here, the marksman rifles, are also .303 caliber. This one, interestingly, someone has actually carved on the stock 7.89 to 7.90. This is the bore diameter, and this almost exactly corresponds to 0.311 inch. It does, in fact, correspond to 0.311 inch, which is the .303 bore diameter. Our other rifle here is a British pattern 14 or P14 Enfield. This is in 7.62 by 54 rimmed. Now you might assume that having been in .303, this would remain in .303. However, there were a couple divisions, or a division, of troops who were equipped with 7.62 by 54 rimmed rifles, and the Enfield actions made better precision rifle platforms than most Nagant actions. So they wanted something for precision rifles in 7.62, and frankly, converting P14s does make sense for doing that, even if it seems a little counterintuitive at first glance. So we have here the original British markings and serial number, and then on the top has been stamped K 7.62, and we have that same caliber conversion stamping on the bolt there. You might wonder if they're already converting Arisakas to precision rifles, why not convert them to 54 rimmed as well? And I think the answer is also that the 303, the P14 Enfield here, is pretty well set up for 54 rimmed already. It's designed for a rimmed cartridge. The magazine is intended for a rimmed cartridge. The bolt face is large enough. The action is long enough. This is definitely a better action to convert to 54 rimmed than a Type 38 Arisaka would be. This rifle is definitely in much better condition. It also has an Arsenal Tallinn marked 1934 barrel, and again, production of these ran through the 1930s. The stock has been cut down, like on the Arisaka. On this one, we do have the front sight present. This is missing on the Arisaka, unfortunately. Here, you can see that these actually used solid front sight posts, not the sort of round, like front aperture that you will sometimes see in fully hooded target rifle sights like this. Because the safety is located on the right side of the gun, there has to be a different style of diopter sight used for a P14. You can see, of course, they got rid of the original sights in order to fit the diopters in there. So we have Tallinn Arsenal markings here on the sight. This is a diopter sight that was made at Arsenal. And then these sights were actually intended for both calibers of rifles. If I can get some better light on this. For 7.62 by 54, you have your adjustment settings here. For 303, aka 7.7 millimeter, that's the metric designation of 303 British, you have adjustment settings over here. And interestingly, this rifle, just as the Arisaka has a pistol grip spliced onto it, so does the Enfield here. And this has a really long stock. This is substantially longer than the original stocks for these. Like, it's way too long for me. This must have been developed, or this particular one must have been made for a particularly tall shooter. Model designations on these guns are really pretty vague and hazy. It's kind of a thing with Arsenal in general. They didn't have any really firm model designations. We see that with the submachine gun, which doesn't have any model designation. Their refurbished rifles have some designations, but again, they're gray. So production of these starts in 1931. It will run until World War II. By 1939, we know from some archival inventory data that they have, between the Defense League, the Defense Forces, and the Border Guards, they have 1,170 of these rifles put together. And it's roughly a 50-50 split between the two different patterns. So they were there in 1940. There isn't, unfortunately, much of a fight in 1940 when the Soviet Union occupies Estonia. And these guns essentially just disappear into the woodwork after that. So both of these, we believe, are Defense League guns. They were both recovered. The Arisaka here in particular was recovered from the attic of a house that was being refurbished. That's, you know, these are guns that get hidden away, forgotten about, and then rediscovered decades later. So that's why they're both in pretty rough condition, especially the Arisaka, unfortunately. But there are extremely few examples of these guns still surviving. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. This is a very rare opportunity to take a look at what the Estonian armed forces were using in the 1930s. So a big thanks to the Estonian Army Museum for giving me access to these two. These are both guns that are on display in the museum. So if you find yourself in Tallinn, definitely take a couple hours, check out the museum. They have a bunch of interesting Estonian small arms, as well as, by the way, also an auxiliary armored vehicle museum that has all sorts of cool stuff in it as well. So check them out. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.